Episode 13 of 20, from teacher to facilitator. Does that mean that your teachers are going to be in the back of the room checking their email, Instagram, and eating Cheetos? I certainly hope not. They have missed the point if that's the case. But there's decidedly a difference. And it's not just semantics, it's not just some wording that we use in PBL. But when you're taking a classroom from being teacher centered to student centered, when you're looking at what students are learning versus what teachers are teaching, things change. Right now, when we go to student ownership and student empowerment, again, it doesn't mean we're giving over the keys. The teacher is still in control of that classroom. They're giving up some of that control so that their learners can be empowered. They're facilitating the learning. They're not the sage on the stage. They're the guide on the side, or maybe they're the sage on the side because they're still the content expert. Right. So you're going to have a lot of questions around this one, but there's definitely a difference, and it takes some modeling. It might take a school visit to go see what it looks like, teacher versus facilitator. But I think every administrator can help their teachers make the shift from teacher to facilitator with these three supports. Support number one is to highlight how teachers guide inquiry by asking questions rather than giving answers. Trevor McKenzie does a great job with this with his book, Inquiry Mindset. He's got another book out where it's just all of his questions. So it's a great place to start just to get inquiry moving. As you're asking questions, as teachers are asking questions, they're empowering their learners to give legitimate answers. Like sometimes it's like, all right, what's 5 times 7? And everybody knows it's 35, but somebody has to speak up so we can move on. So somebody finally says 35. Now, when we're looking at inquiry, we're trying to get our learners to really lean in and truly engage in the questions that we're asking. And one of the ways that you can start to bring your staff on board is that you start to model this process. So you might want to grab Trevor's book and start to figure out what kind of questions can you ask. When you have a faculty meeting, where can you be asking questions instead of just dispensing answers? Right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. It could be a chalk talk. You could have 4 different questions around the room, and then your teachers are putting up Post-it notes to answer. It might be you're asking some questions, they're writing down individually, and then they're going to share with a shoulder partner. But you need to start showing that it's okay to be asking questions and not just holding all the airtime for 45 minutes, just saying things, right? And if you stop saying anything for 5 minutes, then chaos erupts. Well, that's not a great environment, no matter how you look at that. So we're trying to switch that where we're starting to activate our learners, and they're all starting to think instead of just 1 or 2 extroverts that answer all the questions. So we're trying to bring more true inquiry into the classroom. And one support that you can give is to model that, right? So when somebody comes to your office with a big problem, hey, boss, I got a problem. Okay, like, let me know what it is. And then you start asking questions, right? Maybe you start with some clarifying questions. Can you give me some more detail about that? And then you say, well, what are 3 possible options do you think for this situation? And okay, great, 3 possible. Which one do you think would be a great one? And you're asking questions, you're throwing questions back across the desk. And more often than not, if you can get a teacher to give 3 possible solutions to that problem they brought into your office and then pick one of them, it's usually the right answer, right? And they've come up with it on their own, which is super powerful because now the next time they have a problem similar to that, you've now taught them the process of answering their own questions and being empowered. Exactly what we want to do with our learners. So as you're doing that with your teachers, let's say you have 30 staff, they're now doing it with their 26 kids in their classroom, and it's that same process. That's the empowerment we're trying to build. And when you go visit a PBL school that's humming and it's clicking on all cylinders, this is what has happened, right? The principal has found a way to empower the teachers to be facilitators, and then the facilitators have taken that empowerment and passed it down to their students who have now become learners. And they're all in these active seats sitting forward. And the first way to do that is just bring inquiry into your tool bag. So start using that in your daily conversations and faculty meetings, everywhere you go. The second support to help your teachers go from teacher to facilitator is that you can start to coach your teachers to adapt to this new role, right? They don't have to be They don't have to go from teacher to facilitator like 100% tomorrow. But what if during a group time, they've got group contracts, and now they're facilitating that group time rather than just straight teaching and doing direct instruction, right? Starting to point out where are they already doing some facilitation, because they likely are. We're just trying to do it on purpose, and we're trying to doing with that purpose. We're trying to do a better job of that and really empower our learners. Now, you do have to reflect these expectations by changing some of your systems. And what do I mean by that? It means, let's say teacher observations, for instance. If you go in and you're expecting, you look at your checklist and you're expecting to see everything through direct instruction, that's what your teachers are going to give you. They're going to give you exactly what's on that evaluation sheet most of the time. Now, if you change that evaluation sheet to move more from teacher-centric to facilitator-centric, you want to see how many questions the teacher's asking, for instance. That might be on your evaluation sheet now. Now you're encouraging your teachers to go from teacher to facilitator. You're trying to move towards student-led classrooms. So you really got to look at your evaluation. It's one real good place to start that conversation. And you want to be super transparent with your teachers. If you're going to change the expectations on the evaluation, one, if you can have them be a part of that, that's huge. But two, you at least have to communicate that ahead of time, right? And now you need to start teaching that, right? In your PD, in your faculty meetings, how can you start to see more of these things from your teachers? And a lot of times they're on your rubric already in the evaluation, where it's on that far right side where their higher scores are, is you're trying to move towards student-led. So you want to point that out. So if it's already on your evaluation, then you say, hey, you know how you really get to a 5? You get to a 5 by moving from teacher to facilitator. When I'm in there, I want to hear you asking questions. I want the learners to be engaged and leading that conversation, leading the classroom, at least during part of it, right? So you want to start having that conversation and saying, hey, some things are changing, and here's why. Because you might teach the best lesson, but if nobody's learned anything, did we really do what we're called to do? Well, no. We're trying to move from apathetic to engaged, and engaged to empowered. And that's when our learners are really humming. So this is one way that you're going to help that process. The third support is to emphasize the importance of setting expectations and building trust with students. This is a big change for some of your teachers. They did really well in high school in a very traditional setting. They went on to college. It was reinforced even more in a very traditional setting. So they came to teach and said, hey, I'm going to teach in a traditional setting. It worked for me. It'll work for other kids. So when we're starting to change some of these practices, it's a personal thing, right? It's a personal thing, and it's deep. It's hundreds of years deep in us, right? And in our systems. So we want to make sure that we are helping to set expectations and building trust at the adult level, so then they can start to build it at the student level. So you want to start talking about, how is a PBL classroom different? Like maybe if you go to a school visit or you watch a video, how is that classroom different than our classrooms that are traditional? When are there times when we're doing some of those things, right? Like point out the assets that are in your staff right now. I'm sure you're doing some of these things. And when kids are up and moving and maybe they're leaving the space to work or they're meeting with community partners, do we have classroom agreements and expectations that fit that idea, or do they rub against that? Right. So as we're setting norms and agreements, we need to kind of define what it is we want to see in that student-led classroom. Because if we're saying, hey, you're going to sit in the rows, you're going to be quiet, you're going to be compliant all the time, then how am I going to get up and collaborate? Oh, okay, maybe you have different norms during this collaboration time. That's fine. Do the same thing in your faculty meetings. Hey, here's our set of norms that we all came up with. We're going to adjust those norms because we're going to have collaboration time for the next 15 minutes. So we've got a new set of norms. We want to make sure we're protecting people's voice. Take care of your needs. If you have something to say, we want you to say it. Right? And you start to model those norms, so then they can model those norms in their classroom as well. So then they have those support systems. So as they make the shift, they've got that comfort of those systems. So as you, the administrator, start to help your teachers make this shift from teacher to facilitator, use these 3 supports. The first one is that you start leading by example, of course, and you do that by bringing inquiry. You bring inquiry to your personal conversations, group conversations, faculty meetings. You're going to start bringing inquiry and student-led practices. The second step is you're going to coach your teachers to adapt to this new role. And you're going to look at your systems, specifically your evaluation, your walkthrough systems. Are they helping move towards a student-centered classroom, or are they pushing against? And the third support is to emphasize the expectations, the norms, and the agreements. And I would say really that you have at the staff level, so that your teachers can use them at their classroom level and they have that support with them to help them make the shift. One other thing that might help them make the shift is the Binge PBL for Teachers podcast. So you are in the Binge PBL for Administrators podcast right now, 20 episodes, no more than 15 minutes. We've got a teacher version as well that talks about classroom practices. So your teachers can go through 20 episodes, all less than 15 minutes. Each one has a resource along with it. And that's a support that they can use to supercharge their PBL journey. All right, so we've helped your teachers transition from teacher to facilitator. How do we make sure that they're still assessing the learning well? Roll into the next episode to find out.